cheese, piles of croissant, red wine. What do you think we're talking about? We are going to talk about the French paradox. We're going to start in France with a young student, Serge Renaud, who found that he wasn't getting the great education about research that he wanted in France, so he came to Quebec and he enrolled in veterinary school, University of Montreal. And when he was going through school, he noticed that the heart attack incidence in Quebec was very high. He also noted that they had a terrible diet. Quebecois were eating lots and lots of quick foods and fatty foods, and they were eating very few vegetables and drinking no wine. He switched his focus, and instead of working with animals, he decided to work with people, and he got a job at the Montreal Heart Institute. When young Dr. Renaud noticed that there was a link between heart attacks and the coagulation of blood. Small blood clots could cause heart attacks. 1973, he went back to France, and he started a mobile laboratory, traveled around the country, and took blood samples from people and monitored their diet and lifestyle, etc., and noticed that there was a link between blood coagulation, heart attacks, and dietary factors, and especially drinking red wine. In areas where more red wine was consumed, it seemed that the heart attack rate was lower. This came to the attention of the 60 Minutes program in the United States. And they did a whole special segment on this. They called it the French paradox, because Renaud had also shown that the heart attack rate in France was significantly lower than it was in the US, so they wanted to know what was going on. What was this all about? The French were eating the cheese, fatty cheese, buttery croissants, eating goose liver. How is it that they were eating these bad foods and had a lower incidence of heart disease? Well, Renaud came on 60 Minutes and explained that he thought that red wine was an important factor because it reduced the ability of the blood to coagulate, reduced the chance of blood clot formation. But he also said that cheese was important because it tied up calcium, which otherwise may have deposited in arteries. So he didn't say that wine was the only factor. Of course, that's what the public took away, and wine sales started to skyrocket after that. Well, this French paradox is indeed very interesting, and numerous papers have been written on this, and I've looked at dozens and dozens and dozens about whether or not drinking red wine, specifically alcohol, can reduce or maybe even increase the incidence of certain diseases. And I can tell you, after looking at piles and piles of studies, that it's almost impossible to come to a conclusion. Certainly, we're not ready to say that anyone should start drinking red wine if they haven't been drinking it. I think we might say that if you drink about a glass a day, there's probably no reason to stop. But the evidence is not overwhelming, especially because there are so many confounding factors. The French, for example, have their major meal at lunchtime, and they eat much less food. They consume fewer calories. And then there's also the fact that they eat fresh fruits and fresh vegetables much more often than we do. So it's a completely different kind of lifestyle. And then on top of it, we have the problem that death rates may not be recorded exactly the same way as they are in North America. Sometimes the death certificate just says sudden death without saying why. So the French paradox is interesting. The question is there really a paradox at all, or is just a question of bookkeeping? So there's no real conclusion to come to here, except that if you do enjoy drinking that glass of red wine a day, there's no reason to stop. Whether you want to have that buttery croissant with it or not, well, that's a different question. Yeah, why not?